Welcome to this interview hosted by the Belfast Software Craftsmanship Community. This evening we're going to talk to Sandro Mancuso. Sandro is a software craftsman, an author, and international speaker. He has worked on a lot of different areas across the software industry, and he currently works at Coherence, the consultancy company he co-founded based on principles and values of craftsmanship. Using his experiences, he wrote the book on all aspects of software craftsmanship, which also happened to inspire this community. A feat of accomplishments, a high reputation worldwide, established figure in the software craftsmanship community. Yet for some reason, he agreed to come talk to us. Hoi Sandro, bienvenido. I hope I didn't butcher that.
Yeah, yes, it's very, very good. Yeah, so thank you, Jordan. So it was great to be speaking to you and to the Belfast community. It's actually great to see that a new software craftsmanship is being created. So for me, it's always a pleasure, right? So it's a real pleasure to speak to anyone in the craftsmanship community.
Thank you. So the sort of plan tonight is just going to be very casual. I've already sort of briefly introduced who you are and what you do. So I thought we could sort of fill in the blanks along the way. So if you just want to tell us a bit more about yourself and where you came from, your history in the software industry.
Yeah, so I started my career in Brazil, in the middle of nowhere, as I say. So, and since the very beginning, I was very passionate about the details of code, the intricacies of code. And then I was very, when I was starting my career in 1996, the design pattern book had been published in 1995. So that thing about software design and detail of code was very strong on me. And then one of the biggest decisions that I made was to move to London, right? So I heard about extreme programming, I heard about agile and all this kind of stuff. And one of the dreams of my life was to live in London. So a personal dream. And I felt that London, I could combine both. I could.
And you worked quite hard to be in a position to be in London, didn't you? I remember you visited London one time, thinking, that you could integrate quite well, and it was something like you said you could barely order a McDonald's with your English, so then you had to go off and work on yourself. So I think it's really cool that that you can sort of you're able to say that I worked on that, because I think you said as well you didn't get a lot of support to go towards London.
Yeah, for me, it was as I say often, it was a very long journey. And coming from where I was coming from, London seemed such an impossible dream in a way, right? So of course, then I had to prepare myself, put a lot of effort, let's say, to get to London. Because one thing that was strong on me, like for example, I have lived in London now for 16 years, right? So I'm a very proud British citizen now as well. So, but what I felt is back then, I could have come to London earlier. I could have tried my luck earlier. But in my view, I would be in the right city, given my preferences, of course, with the wrong life, if you know what I mean. So I wanted to come to the city of my dreams, or to the country of my dreams, with the right life. And for that, I would need to be competing with people that go to Oxford, to Cambridge, UCL, and like these massive universities, a lot of people that are far better educated than I was. So of course that I could either just sit down and cry and say, oh, the world is really unfair and I'm underprivileged and stuff, or actually stand up and do something for myself and then face the world as it is and work much harder and work harder, basically. So I came here in 2000. I got all my savings. That was not many. So because the exchange rate was very difficult for Brazilians back then to actually travel to Europe. And I spent 1 month in the UK just traveling around, because I don't think that London or any capital really represents a country. So I wanted to travel around, see if all that dream that I had, I would have that, it would be a match, right? So I traveled around many places and stuff, and I really fell in love. So that just confirmed. But I realized, as you were saying, that my English was nowhere near enough to actually find a job here. And my skill sets were not enough, because the technology that I was using in Brazil, they were not used in the UK. So back then, Java was a big thing in here. I was working with Delphi. So I decided that I had to go back, spend another 4 years. And that's when I invested in private English classes. I did a master's degree. I changed jobs so I could align my skill set to the skill set needed for the British market. So got my Italian citizenship. That helped as well, because then I could come in as an European and not as a Brazilian. So there were 4 years of massive investment to make sure that when I arrived in London, I would be able to compete.
Yeah, so I have to ask you, if you were to do that journey over again, do you think London would have been the choice again?
Yes.
Because it's quite a interesting development environment now. It's yeah, especially for someone coming from another country. There's a lot of risk. There's a lot of unknowns right now. So do you think maybe that would have been the choice again?
So in my case, yes. But I want to be very clear here, because I don't want to give people impression that London is the best place in the world. I think that people have different aspirations in life, and there are some personal aspects of your life that you would like to improve. There are aspects of your professional. I don't like the distinction of personal and professional life. We can touch upon that later, but given my preferences, I want to make it very clear, given my preference, what I wanted for my life, where I was coming from, and what I wanted for my future, London was the place for me. And if I had to do that again, I would still choose London.
Yeah, you've done quite a lot of like things locally in London too. You founded the London Software Craftsmanship Community.
Mm-hmm.
You could say that sort of, would you say the people around you sort of drove you to be what you are today?
Yes. So here's the thing, right? So it depends on the people that you surround yourself shapes you. But I always say for example, not everyone that is around you serves as a source of motivation. Depending where you are coming from or the kind of relationships you have, some people can actually discourage you from following your dreams, or they might not even understand. They might even become a limitation to you, because they it's not that they drag you down, but they also don't help you to progress. So I also had to change who I was surrounded by, right? So there were people that are inspiring you, but that doesn't mean that they are next to you, but you can try to move toward those people, find those people. And for me, choosing certain groups were quite essential. So for example, my relationship with software communities, they started in Brazil, because I joined the Java community in Brazil. But I had to move to São Paulo, which is the financial capital, because I grew up in the countryside, and where I was, no one would understand the aspirations that I had in life. No one would understand. They would not even believe. Like, as soon as I spoke to some of my close friends and even family, for them it was so ridiculously and impossible that they would discourage you. Like, why don't you just work here in a shop? And so I had to move to different places to find the like-minded people that I needed. And I did that once. First of all, I did in Brazil, moving to São Paulo. But then I did at a global level, coming to London. It's the same thing, right? So even São Paulo was limited, because even if I was doing, for example, doing the things that let's say you mentioned a few things in my introduction, but for example, doing the same things. The things that you do, they have a different impact depending on where you do them. I can be exactly the same professional in the countryside in Brazil. I would not have had the impact or the success that I had doing the same things in London. So choosing your surroundings, who you have relationships with, and where you do things matter a lot.
Yeah, that's really wise words. There you go. You join for some craftsmanship and you get some life lessons. Uh, I should also point out that yeah, we are indeed having a sort of casual drink as we talk this, and for you guys at home, if you want to join in, myself.
I'm already like having mine, right? So
Yeah, so I poured myself a nice glass here. It's a Japanese whiskey my brother got me for Christmas, so I'm indulging in a bit of that. What are you drinking, Sandro?
Lagavulin 16.
I've never heard of that. What is that?
It's Isla. It's a single malt Isla.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it's one of my favorites.
It's good. I might try it out then. I might try it out. Yeah, I'm not too versed in the sort of the whole whiskey and all that kind of world, but I appreciate a good one.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I thought it'd be interesting to hear. There's a lot of people here watching. It's going to be their sort of first time being exposed to craftsmanship, so I thought maybe we could talk about your history with the craftsmanship world and what you sort of think it is. 'Cause I think a lot of people have their own sort of different views on it. Uh, yeah, there's a lot of different definitions out there. So maybe if you could bring some people up to speed with what do you think?
Yeah, so, and by the way, cut me off if you feel that I'm going too far on tangents and stuff, but like, before we talk about craftsmanship or what it is, and it's worth going back in history and try to understand why it existed in the first place, why people start talking about this thing. So basically, I'll go through, I'll try to do a quick history of events so I can get to craftsmanship, right? So I started in the mid-90s. Mid-90s was that turning point where unified process, or the RUP that we call. So the iterative methodologies were emerging, right? So we already had some notions of extreme programming towards the late 90s. There were some guys talking about Scrum here and there. But more this iterative approach, that initial aversion to the waterfall model in a more structured way. So that culminated in I think I forgot the dates actually, but Agile might be completed 20 years this week maybe. So what happens was a group of people that were talking about more methodology with a faster feedback loop and more iterative. They decided to get together in a ski resort in Utah to talk about those methodologies. So there was the guys that called that meeting were a guy called Uncle Bob, or Robert C. Martin, that probably people might know, Alistair Colburn.
I've heard of him. Sounds familiar.
So Alistair Colburn and Martin Fowler. So those three guys, they were planning to do a similar thing. They combined their lists and they invited 25 people. And out of those 25 people, 17 people accepted the invitation. They went to a ski resort in Utah in February 2001. And in that meeting, there were Kent Beck, Ron Jeffries, Ken Schreiber, Jeff Sutherland. So what's it called? Dave Thomas, Andy Hunt, the pragmatic programmer guy. So all of those guys representing Scrum, DFDM, Crystal, extreme programming, so all of those different methodologies back then. So they went to this ski resort, it's called Snowbird, if I'm not wrong. And during those 2-3 days that they were there, they found what was common across that 6 or 7 methodologies that they were representing. And what was common is that business agility, that fast feedback loop. And that's when Agile was born. And Agile became Agile software development methodology, which is an umbrella of a few methodologies. So, and Agile exploded. So that was 2001. But in the next few years, in the early 2000s, people like myself got ecstatic and said, wow, this is amazing, right? So now we developers, we will be working closer to the business. We will have a more meaningful relationship. We will make decisions together. We work in a much faster feedback loop. And a lot of people like myself, we got extremely excited with Agile because it was coming from developers. There were, for example, the most focus on development was extreme programming. The one that is more focused on process is Scrum, but there are a lot of things in between. But we were very excited about that. But that family, that group of people, they were not a happy family. So what happened in those early days, it was a mix of a blessing and a curse at the same time. Certain methodologies became far more prominent than others. So Scrum became mainstream. Everyone loved Scrum because Scrum was an easier methodology to sell to managers, to companies, because it was process related. And it's the promise like, let's speed up things, let's do things faster, which is not exactly what it meant, but that's how it was interpreted. And Agile as a word, I don't think that it was intentional, but became a massive marketing thing because you cannot reject Agile. So you see what I'm saying? So for example, you as a company, you cannot say that you are not Agile when your competitor is saying that they are Agile. They adopted Agile. If you don't adopt Agile when your competitors do, what makes you? So Agile had this massive appeal, mainly on the Scrum side. The blessing in that is that it spread that message across the globe very fast, which was good for us as developers or our software industry. The bit of a curse is that the technical side of Agile was left behind. While Scrum became far popular, the technical aspect that was more on the extreme programming side was not so widely adopted. So then we had loads of people doing iterations and backlogs and sprints and stuff, but with no improvements in their engineering techniques. And that's what I call the Agile hangover in the book, because after having a partial adoption of Agile, they felt that now they were just building sheet a bit faster, or could see the sheet piling up every 2 weeks, right? As I normally describe. Because the engineering practices were not better, right? So that created that initial excitement that people like myself had was also became a disappointment. But that was not only people like myself, including Uncle Bob. And people that were more on the technical side of Agile also became disappointed. So then we fast forward a few years. So then in 2008, because there was this friction within the Agile community, the Agile community almost started breaking apart. And a lot of people were joining the Agile community purely focused on process, and they were forgetting about the technical aspects, the engineering side of Agile. So developers, there is a great question, like we say, like, is it developers that are moving away from Agile, or is it Agile that is moving away from developers? And I think that is both. So that created frustration, and that created a reaction, and that's where software craftsmanship comes in. So software craftsmanship in 2008 was a reaction to the partial adoption of Agile, or to the partial popularization of Agile. So Uncle Bob and another group in Chicago in 2008 decided to restore that balance, and they started putting the focus back into the technical practice, but they expanded. So instead of just taking extreme programming and bringing that back, they went way beyond. They create something much bigger than XP. This is another thing we can discuss, the difference between craftsmanship and extreme programming, because they are not the same thing at all. So, but the craftsmanship movement came in to be a developer movement. The focus on quality, in professionalism, in disciplines, engineering disciplines. So that's how craftsmanship was born. And I was involved with that group of people And consequently, I love the idea. I didn't create it, but I love the idea. And I ended up creating the community in London, which was the first in Europe. So that is my involvement.
It's yeah. So you could summarize it as the craftsmanship ideology was born for those left behind by Agile. I don't know how you. I like to think I had a good sort of analogy that I don't know how you guys do Christmas, but here quite often there's an adult table, and then there's a children table, and sort of the adult table is like all the people that are like the stakeholders and very like the open people involved in the agile process, and then the children table is like all the developers, and
Mm-hmm.
it's as if they just sort of forgot the children table and they don't check up and how they're doing and stuff like that. That's the way I sort of envisioned it one time.
I think in the early days is an interesting analogy. The one that, in the early days it was certainly like that. In the early days, because the craftsmanship was a thing that came into to not complain, but like fight certain things that didn't go so well. So there was a natural friction. Even like, for example, there were some talks. If you go back in history and take some old Uncle Bob talks, or even the talks that I gave at the beginning, they were quite angry. Let's say we were like more like this is an alternative. Agile went wrong, and this is the alternative. So, but we were also young and we were also naive back then, because we had that we had to have a strong message to create that friction and try to restore that balance. But at the end of the day, how things evolved, it became more civilized, and for the right reasons. Because then what happened? So I'm now against this whole thing about craftsmanship against agile, that is against lean, and that is against DevOps. So all of those things, they complement each other, right? So the path that agile took, that became far more focused on the process, this is not invalid, it's just incomplete. But if we can complete that with the evolution of craftsmanship, we are not throwing that away. I don't think that the process side and all the great advancements that agile brought to our industry are bad. On the contrary, I think that they are excellent. We are in a better place because of that. But now we have craftsmanship that found its place, agile found its place, lean found its place. DevOps was a great complement as a movement, as an idea. So that was a hole in there. So all of those things, for me, now we are in a better shape because we don't fight each other. We work together. We complement each other.
Yeah, I definitely agree. And personally, I think I could learn a lot of stuff about working together. Um, so that was about the history of craftsmanship and about your kind of history and how you came up. Also, I thought it was really interesting that the kind of places you've worked in. So one place I thought was really interesting is you talked about how you worked in an investment bank, and I think it was a story of like how it was very rigid, and you sort of brought in good ideals. Was that the story you talked about in the book? I think
I
there's a
talk
few
about
ones.
different stories in the book. So
Yeah.
there is a story about an architect. There is a story about like me pairing with a guy that has the wrong notion of time. There are different stories. They come from different places. I don't know exactly which one you are referring to.
I think it was you took an opportunity, you just took a risk to interview at the investment bank or something like that, and then you guys started doing things sort of craftsmanship ways, whereas like they were very stuck in their everything's got to be like a lot of safety around it and not really taking that much risk because obviously it's an investment bank, and but you sort of the idea of being flexible. Um, and I was talking to some people that were in London in the finance industry, and they were just telling me about how horrible it was and stuff like that. And I really do wish that I had read the book at that point because as you say, like the craftsmanship way brings in a way for people to learn that there is better ways. Um, so yeah, I think uh, I think that brings me on to my next point is the book, a
Mhm.
fantastic book. And for anybody out there that is looking to learn about software craftsmanship or bring the sort of the good ways to build software, I think this is the one-stop book. you've written. So I just wanted to ask you about what was the process of writing the book like?
This is it is quite interesting. So it started almost like it was not exactly a diary, but it was me venting my own frustrations alone in a Word document or in my own text. Almost imagine like writing a diary, but like much more longer and elaborate. It's just venting my frustrations. And I realized that I gradually start telling my own story to myself. So, for example, I never had when I started, I didn't have the ambition to publish. I was not even I didn't even think I was capable of writing a book, mainly in a language that was not my first language. Mainly when I started, it was even harder for me. So, but then the things that I was writing, I was also talking about, because I started through the community. The community is really, really a special thing for me, because as I started the craftsmanship community in London, I started using our meetups to say whatever was in my head in a very safe space. I didn't need to it's much easier for you to vent and say what's in your head in a community of like-minded people than to your boss, right? An investment bank, right? So that's how it started. So I started telling those stories and how I felt about those things, and and then I started being invited to go to conferences and talk about those things. And basically, my early talks about that time, I was just like going on stage or either in a community or in a conference and just having a brain dump about how I think about things. And that started resonating with other people. And I started putting more structure that became eventually the early days of a book. And I ended up doing a link pub. So going back to your question. So I started with a link pub, and the book was called Software Craftsmanship, which was a clash, of course, with the Software Craftsmanship book from Peter McGreen, because I could not provide a different name anyway. So I said, this is my brain dump of what I think software craftsmanship is. Because we were at the beginning, because like the guys in Chicago, Uncle Bob and the guys in Chicago, although they created craftsmanship like the manifesto, but they never expanded on that. So that early days, we were still trying to define what this software craftsmanship is. And then it helped me to put that on paper. So then I created a link pub thing, and a lot of people liked the early versions of the book. And then there was a guy called Marcus Gardner. He wrote TDD by example, if I'm not ATDD by example. It's a book on a Kent Beck series. He's a German guy, very cool guy. And we were in a conference together, and he said, like, why don't you publish your book properly? He said, because the content that you are writing would be better done in a proper publisher instead of Limpa, because it kind of devalues the content. But I never thought that way, because I never wrote that to sell. See what I'm saying? I wrote that this is me, this is what I think of, and I didn't care who would read that. But then he convinced me, and then he made the introduction to Apprentice Hall. But in the meantime, I was in Chicago. That was in 2013, and I met the pragmatic programmer guys. I met Dave Thomas. So, and he came we were at the same conference. He came to my talk on software craftsmanship. He liked the content. So, and he's one of the founders of Pragmatic Programmers, right? So the book, the publisher. So, and he said that they would like to publish that. So, oh, you know what? Like in our conversation, I said, "Oh, I'm not writing this book," and so, "Oh, why don't you send to us? Let us have a look at it." So, and I was really excited about it. I said, "Wow, I met Dave Thomas, right?" So, the guy that wrote Pragmatic Programmer book, and he's interested in, he liked my talk, and he would like to see my book. And so I got back to London very excited and stuff, and I told my business partner, "Oh, I met this guy," and blah, blah. And then Mesh said, "I'm very happy for you, but I don't think your book should be published by Pragmatic Programmers. If you decide to publish, it's the wrong publisher." And I was a bit pissed off with him. Right, so he's probably going to watch this and laugh. So I don't think I ever told that in a public forum, by the way. So then I said, fuck that. Like, I'm gonna send that, and so I sent that. And the pragmatic programmers, it was not reviewed by Dave Thomas, but whoever in his team. And so they said, look, we like the second half of your book, but we don't like the first. So basically what we want you to do, we want you to dump the first half and expand on the second half. I was desolated. I was really upset, because if I had to choose which side to dump, I would dump the second and not the first. Because the first half is where I talk about the mindset, the ideology, and the second half is the one more prescriptive. What I talk about driving technical change, interviews, is more actionable. So if you think about, like, when you take the book, the first half is very ideological. The second half is a bit more prescriptive. I talk about more things that you probably could potentially try to apply. So the pragmatic programmers as a company, which I admire, by the way, this is not a criticism on them, it's just, but normally their books, they tend to be more focused in terms of, this is what you do, this is the recipe for this and that. So they wanted to do that with craftsmanship. They say, like, let's write a book on craftsmanship that is prescriptive, that companies can buy and say, we are implementing software craftsmanship in our company, that's the rule. And I hated the idea, because for me, this is exactly one of the mistakes in Agile. The whole idea of being agile, being agile instead of following a process, became Agile today is following processes. And I felt that I would be doing a disservice to software craftsmanship if I tried to do the same. So then I said no to pragmatic programmers. But then I met the Apprentice Hall, and Matt said, like, most of the books that are more ideological and stuff, and they are from Apprentice Hall. And the guys liked the book as it was. And Uncle Bob was very nice to write the foreword to the book, and the book was part of his quest. So I think this is so there is a process of writing which I didn't cover much, but like this background story for me was very important, because this was a very big decision for me, because I didn't have a connection with Apprentice Hall. I didn't have an agreement with them. I only had the pragmatic programmers offer. But what they wanted to do with craftsmanship, in my view, would do a disservice to craftsmanship. And so that's why I said no.
Well, I'm glad you said no, otherwise we wouldn't have been here today. And I thought it was funny the way, you said you got was it Dave Thomas? You're like, oh, I got to meet Dave Thomas. The same way right now, after reading your book and being here right now, it feels like surreal to be talking to you. And, one of the funny things I found from reading your book is the biggest takeaway that I got from it was near the end in your like extra section was about analogies, because I love to use analogies. And the little paragraph you wrote about how like it's you need to be careful using analogies, because if people don't know the context to something, you can sort of lead them further astray, and they might not get what you're talking about. So yeah, I want to thank you for that part. But also I did the whole book overall was a great enjoyment. It's funny too, because before I read your book, I wasn't really aware of a software craftsmanship, but I was given the Clean Code book about maybe 7 years ago, and it says the word craftsmanship on the front of it, I think. And I went to the London Software Craftsmanship Community conference, like 2017, and like I just I'd seen like the software craftsmanship, I've seen the craftsmanship name everywhere and like all that kind of stuff. It wasn't until I read your book that I started like realizing I'd seen it everywhere. And there's actually a phenomenon for that. It's like the buy hotter or something. It's like a double barrel name, and like it's like if you were looking at a car, and you start seeing that car everywhere, and you think, oh, like, is this like some sort of weird universal thing? But it's actually it's been there the whole time. You just haven't subconsciously been looking for it. So yeah, I thought that was quite funny in that aspect. You touched a bit on there about interviews and all that kind of stuff. And I was looking up like your company's like sort of process and interviews and job descriptions, and I thought it was actually really interesting because so many job descriptions out there you see are just sort of bullet points, and they just look sort of cookie cutter in a way. And I thought like your take on the whole approach was really interesting. So for those watching, would you like to sort of give like an overview about that?
Yeah, so I think that I wrote 3 chapters on interview in the book. So I covered that extensively because the reason that I tackled that problem is a lot of companies, they say that they want to change their culture, right? So a lot of people want to transform their organization. So for me, there are 2 problems. Like one is like if someone wants to transform their organization or even their team, the mindset of their team, one thing is you need to take the people that are currently there and find a way to show them different ways and convince them that there are better ways of doing things. And this is a very difficult process. But another thing is you need to stop your problem, assuming that this is treated as a problem, bigger. And how do you do that? The interview process is key because this is what I was discussing in my previous employer, like the investment bank that I was working for. So look, you hired me to help you to change a lot of things within the organization, bring that mindset. We already have a lot of work in transforming what we have, which is a lot, or take what we have to the new mindset. But the first thing we need to do is to stop making the problem bigger. So if you want a different culture, you need to stop hiring for the old culture. So this is what led me to write those chapters and focus on interview, because I felt that a lot of companies were still hiring for the old company or the old culture, and then they had the double work. For me, every new person needs to be an ally to move the culture, the existing, the status quo to the next level. So they need to come with that mindset. They cannot be another block. So now going back to the interview, so I describe a lot of different techniques and stuff. So I don't like cookie cutter. For example, I think that you need to have this kind of degree, or you are too specific on the technology stack that you use, or you need to have X years of experience, or you do interviews where you have like a tick box. You have all the predefined questions before you go to the interview as an interviewer, or using algorithms, or using whiteboards to test developers instead of using the real tools. So there are loads of things that I start saying like, look, this is all wrong, at least in my perception. So we decided to interview developers as developers. So I made a distinction, for example, that there is a person that calls like, I'm a developer, and there is someone that says, I'm a Java developer. Because as soon as you say I'm a Java developer, you are limiting yourself to a technology. So there is the person limiting herself, and there is the company limiting the applicants. So then I say, why don't we, we are hiring software professionals, we are hiring developers, experience, like I talked about that. For me, experience is transient and relative, right? So you are experienced compared to whom? In which kind of skill? And the fact that you might be experienced today in one technology doesn't make you experienced tomorrow in a completely different environment. So the way that we measure seniority is also wrong. Mainly when you were hired, you put that in your job description. You need to have 5 years of Java experience. Like, why 5 and not 7 or 6, or why this degree or this grade? So what are you trying to achieve here? So then I was against all of that, and then we reshaped completely. We have a far more holistic approach, let's say, to the people that we try to hire.
Yeah, and you know what? That brought me on to my next point really beautifully. So we talked about the past, we talked about the present, and I thought it'd be rude not to talk about the future. So right here in Belfast, there is a system in which you can do a year conversion course at university, and then after that year, you can go work in industry. So a lot of companies locally are involved in that. But the problem is that they define what the course teaches people. So I remember watching a video that one of the lecturers was like, "Oh, we teach Java and database technologies and all kind of stuff because that's what the companies want." But I feel like that's the wrong direction. I feel like we should be teaching the fundamentals because those things will change. And as you said in your book, it's you want to look out for your career. So those kind of courses they look out for the companies, but it doesn't really look out for developers. But I still think it's really important too because it gives an opportunity to a lot of people who may not have had that opportunity before. So they've done a different course and then they do the conversion course. So they bring like a lot of different experiences in. But on the flip side, I think the 4 year sort of course standard, maybe 5 years, some people, that's still, I think you guys at Coherence, you sort of do like a year apprenticeships, is that right? Sometimes people do like a month or two or sort of more. So I thought maybe
This evolved, right? So one thing that we took, and this is really at the heart of craftsmanship, is the notion of the original name we used to give is apprenticeships, right? But apprenticeships is a term that we changed more recently, like about a year and a half ago. It's apprenticeships, like mainly when the British government have the apprenticeship whole program, and the apprenticeship coming from the British government is very different from our apprenticeship. So there was a lot of confusion of what apprenticeship meant. So basically, like what we were trying to achieve, just to give you more context, is in our case, now I'm purely talking about our company, I'm not talking in general. What we felt is there is a certain set of skills that are really, really important for us, that we consider the foundation for a craftsperson, right? So that we expect a software craftsperson to have. So those skills not always are very well taught or learned in different places. So what we wanted to do is a person to be considered a craftsperson at Coherence, they need to have a certain level. This has nothing to do, this is the difference with the government, that has nothing to do with how many years you've been in the industry or where you work for or which technology you use. It's the more fundamental knowledge that we expect people to have. So then we created very early days this idea of apprenticeship. It evolved because when we started, Coherence started with me and Mesh working from Starbucks, right? So Coherence is totally self-funded by me and Mesh. So we started from nothing. So we had to adapt our process according to our financial conditions and to the size of our company. So at the beginning, we were mentoring one-to-one. We hired a few apprentices towards the end of our first year, and they were mentored directly by us. As we evolved, we tried to standardize a little bit more because it was very inefficient. And the skills that the apprentices were learning, they were different depending on the mentor that they had as well, or the dedication that the mentor could give and so on. So we created this idea of academy. And the academy normally goes from 3 to 6 months, and it's about skills, it's not about your seniority. For example, we had people coming through our academy program that had 10 years of experience. On average, they have like a few years of experience. The bar to get into our apprenticeship is around 1-2 years of experience. And then say, well, why are you talking about years of experience if you said that you were against years of experience? It's a little bit different because for us, being a consultancy company, working with clients, our clients expect a certain degree of maturity, not only technical practice, but maturity. So we cannot take an undergrad and transform this person a consultant if this person has not been in the industry for a period of time. See what I'm saying? So they need, being in a software project, having a manager, having deadlines, having bugs in production, those things we cannot teach in an apprenticeship. Those are things that you need to live. You need to breathe that experience. What we can do in our, what we call academy, is polish their technical skills, but not give life. This is what we do. And then we talk about TDD and design and agile methodologies and how to deal with clients and how to deal with teams, how to do demos. And then there is the whole foundation that there are many different disciplines and stuff. So that 3 to 6 months is normally the program, so they are considered a cross person.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said apprentice. That's the old term. Yeah, I remembered. It's in training, isn't it? A cross person in training. Yeah.
We had to change all of that. So all of those names have been changed, or they changed about a year and a half ago, around a year and a half ago, maybe a bit more, a bit less. But because of that misinterpretation of the term apprenticeship, and that would giving the impression that those people were really inexperienced and they were learning how to code, which was not true in our case. They were people with experience in the industry, but not necessarily in the skills that we value for them to be considered cross-person.
Do you think that we need to be changing the way that people are set up? So the way these, like a large volume of people are still going to be coming through universities and stuff like that. But at university, they learn really bad habits. So I was speaking to someone the other day and they said that they got marks on their assignments if they provided code in their comment to explain the code. So, the person marking the assignment could understand. They also had to provide like a certain level of tests. Obviously, then they're just like, oh, we need the test now. But the tests, they said the tests they're writing, were just Monday. They're just they're just passing anywhere. They weren't really testing the code they built. Do you think that there needs to be, by the craftsmanship community, some sort of push to change the way the education is approached?
The short answer is yes, but the long answer is far more complicated than that, because first of all, I went to university more than 20 years ago, right? In fact, I finished my university in 1997, right? So, and I was in Brazil. So, and I know there are universities and universities, right? So, but in general, from what I've seen, I studied computer science and I have a master's degree in distributed objects. So I came from an academic background. I'm questioning the value of that today. And this, I know this is a bit controversial because it was difficult for me to accept that myself. And there are a few problems that I cannot solve, but bear with me for a sec. So what I'm trying to say is, what I feel in academia is that the professors themselves, and now I'm talking about the average university, as I said, there are universities and universities, but the average professor, they had an academic career, and they themselves struggle to relate to the industry. So they will always refer to the very theoretical things that they judge important because that's the path that they took.
Yeah, they don't give a shit about the students, they just care about the research, which is fair. It's fair.
Exactly, because that's the career that they chose themselves, and they cannot help the students with what the industry needs. So, and I'll give you like a very, this is very interesting. So before we started the craftsmanship community, I joined a community called the LJCs, the London Java Community. That's how my community work started in the UK with the LJC. So in the Java community, there was an initiative that we created to tackle universities. So maybe we could go to the universities, and like we were a bunch of we had a lot of senior members in the Java community, and we had a program that's called Meet a Mentor that I think is still might still be going. And so we contacted, I remember many years ago, we actually contacted some people from the big universities of London. And I remember being in the meeting with a lot of head of whatever within those universities and those professors. And we say, look, guys, what we are proposing to you here is that we are all people in the industry. What we would like to do is, for free, to speak to your students and share with them knowledge from the industry. Be able to offer hands-on sessions, career advice, and talk about the industry, so when they graduate, they have a better idea of what is waiting for them, right? So we felt, it's like, how on earth would they reject it? Because that's a brilliant idea, like a bunch of people like really willing to help completely for free outside working hours, right? I was shocked to see those professors rejecting the idea. They didn't see the point. They felt that whatever they were being taught at Imperial or London University College of London or whatever, all the other ones, I'm not talking about the specifics, but like, was good enough. So basically, they almost felt offended. It's like, who the hell do you think? Like, we are a professor of these major university. Are you saying that we are not teaching our students the right skills? Are you saying that we don't know what's going on? That's the reaction that we had. And that was, for me, like, you have absolutely no idea how upset. I was sad, really, really sad. Going back home, it's like, I cannot believe that most of us were really trying to help. Look, there was no commercials, there was no social media, there was no, like, I didn't have a company. I worked for a bank, right? So I think I was even working for a consultancy back then. So there was no promotion. We were doing really because we want to help students. The universities didn't care. And the students themselves, because they also don't have the maturity, they're in the early days of their careers, they are still at university. They also don't realize what is ahead of them. So they also, not all of them understood the value of that proposition. So that leads me to think, like, is the whole, for example, let's say I have 2 kids. I would love them to, well, if they wanted to follow similar career path, I can help them massively, a help that I never had, right? But would I ask them to study 4 years of computer science, or 3 years, whatever that is in the UK? My case was 4 years in Brazil. Or would I just try to accelerate, say, you know what, 4 years, you're stuck in a university, learning things that most of it probably will not be needed. You will end up those 4 years. First of all, you'll be stuck for 4 years, delaying the starting your career, leave that 4 years with a debt, while you could come in as a very junior person, as an apprentice or something like that, with a very basic salary, and in a year or two, already be at a junior kind of level, have very specialized training courses, and join the development team earlier in a lower salary, I probably would choose that.
Yeah, I think there's a few movements like that here in Belfast, where the companies are trying to get involved. So I think for any of those involved in that, I would definitely listen to what Sandro's saying. Um, it's hard too because, at the end of the day, the universities have their goals, the companies have their goals. It's basically what craftsmanship is trying to find the in between that satisfies everybody, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah, so in the universities, for example, I think that there are, so, and by the way, I don't want to give the impression that I'm against university, again, because there are many aspects that I cannot replace. So, for example,
Oh, I agree as well. University, it's a very special place, and I think it's a very important institution. But I feel like it's just the sort of wrong direction things are going in.
yeah, I wonder, like, for example, if computer science should be split as a course, like, because, for example, if you want to work with very specialized algorithm or create compilers or knowing the nitty-gritty of networks and ports and adapters, all that kind of like hardware architecture, I can see the value of a more formal, like, way to learn, that, like, going through university and doing stuff. But most of people don't become the ones writing the algorithms for Google, right? Or stuff like that. Most of us are working in the industry, building software and stuff. And there is a misalignment of the investment that is made and what is taught in a computer science degree to what we actually end up doing. But I don't devalue that. As long as you had a better return given the path that you were choosing. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, fortunately here in Belfast, we've already sort of gone down that route. There's the computer science course, and then there's a software engineering course. So it's moving in the right direction, definitely. So that was sort of, we just touched on the sort of future of maybe education. What do you see as the future of software craftsmanship, where it's sort of moving? Um,
There are a few things that I think that we didn't do well that I would like to correct. Because we were a counterculture, let's say, right? So there was the agile culture. We were trying to counter that a bit. We were trying to bring the needle back to the middle, or a little bit more leaning towards the engineering side and not the process side. We came in strong on the quality and stuff like that. The problem when you do these counter movements is like politics is always the same, right? So you are in one spectrum and then you try to counter that, but then the needle doesn't start moving and stop in the middle. It continues going to the other side. And I felt that, for example, on the craftsmanship movement, people that got too obsessed with craftsmanship, they lost pragmatism, for example. So I've seen a lot inside the craftsmanship movement, people saying, quality is paramount. So fuck the client, fuck who's paying. You know what? I will spend 5 hours renaming this variable. And while I'm not happy with these unit tests, I will not move because that's the wrong thing to do. And blah, blah, blah. And they lose sight of the bigger picture because they are so extracting like blood from stone in terms of to get that ultimate quality for that 4 lines of code.
I just want to interject. There's probably my colleagues watching right now, and they see that, they see me as that, but actually I do care about like the customer stuff, because that's what our job is providing, the customer with what they need. But yeah, I just want to interject there. I can envision them tomorrow morning, clipping this and being like, oh, "This is you right here."
But these, for me, this is a thing that I think that we will need to address because, for example, I was actually having a more philosophical, if you like, conversation not long ago, and I was thinking about like, how could we phrase that? Because, for example, I don't want to give the impression that we should not focus on quality. Okay, like a different way of thinking. I believe that the dichotomy of speed versus quality is the false dichotomy. And because we keep that, we think that dichotomy is the right dichotomy. So for example, if I want to focus on quality, I lose speed, or to speed up, I lose quality. This creates the wrong discussion and the wrong attitude. So as I was thinking more and more about that, I think that, let me try to phrase that properly, but like excellence should be bounded by pragmatic solutions. You cannot have excellence that is unbounded, because the craftsmanship movement did that. They say, you know what, we need to focus on the ultimate quality of our software, but that quality, that excellence became unbounded, and when it becomes unbounded, it trumps business needs, it trumps the return on investment, it trumps everything. But so the way to avoid that conflict and say, look, the solution itself needs to be constrained. So like, look, what is the problem that we're trying to solve here? What is the most effective and pragmatic solution? I'm not saying the shittest solution, by the way. I'm saying like, this is an effective solution, but can we constrain the problem domain or even the solution space and have a pragmatic, and we deem that pragmatic solution, then you have excellence. But that would be constrained by the boundaries that we defined to achieve our goal. Because then you have the right place to discuss trade-offs and say, look, I will have a lot of quality in here, but that other bit in there that I need to reintegrate, you know what? We're gonna put a fucking interface in front of it, we're gonna protect that bit, but I'm not gonna refactor that shit. Right? So I will keep focus on here. And if ever I touch that bit of code in there, then I will deal with that. But for now, that is out of scope. See what I'm saying? So you constrain the solution, and within that solution, then you have excellence, but not the other way around.
Yeah, yeah. Personally, like I would spend like a bit time refactoring, because I see the potential in the future that would slow down somebody else. So I think one thing I took away from craftsmanship is helping other people, because you don't know who's going to be working on that code in the future. But yeah, at the same time, pragmatism is incredibly important, because you don't want to come across like me, where it seems like dogmatic. So yeah, a lot of things to take away from that.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, like part of the craftsmanship manifesto, because for example, although we talk about well-crafted software, you also talk about steadily adding value, right? We need to steadily adding
Yep.
value. We are not saying like in one user story, we are going to rebuild the entire system. We are going to provide quality gradually, focused, one bit at a time. We are not going to change the whole world and delay the return investment. We also talk about productive partnerships. And partnerships with whom? With the customers, because that's where it comes from. The Craftsmanship Manifesto builds on top of the Agile Manifesto. We talk about like not only customer collaboration, but a productive partnership. And in order to have a productive partnership with your customer, and by customer, we can understand whoever pays for your service, regardless if you are a permanent employee, a consultant, a contractor, but someone, like whatever you do, unless that you're playing with your own toys at home, you are providing a service, and we cannot lose sight that if you want to be treated as professionals, means that we are providing a service, and there's people paying for our service. So one of the important things is their needs. Of course, we need quality, but we also need to cite the need. What we cannot do is to sacrifice their needs in order to achieve our idea of quality, while we are paid to satisfy their needs. So this is what I'm talking about. That's where pragmatism needs to come in. That's how you constrain your boundaries. Look, I will always strive for the best quality possible within the constraints that we define together for that piece of work.
Yep, I wholeheartedly agree. We've just hit the hour mark, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to ask some of the people watching if they've got any questions. But while we wait for that, I thought, do you have any ideas of how the future of programming is going to turn out? So I got some sort of like, maybe where it might be heading. So um, I thought the pandemic was like quite of a sort of wake up call, and the idea that we build so much of our software around our current technologies right now, and it's so integrated. So we build around the whole like internet, the internet how it is now, but that could be ripped from us so quickly, and so much software relies on that whole infrastructure. I thought maybe where do you think, like, where would that be in the future? Well, are you got any ideas of maybe how the programmer, the craftsman in the future would work?
I think there are so many different aspects that we can explore if you want to look at the future, because there is the future of programming languages and tooling. There is the future of the work that we do and where do you do it from, right? So the interaction that we have with colleagues and clients and stuff like that. So there are multiple aspects to this. So we will need to pick one to actually explore. So for example, if you talk about work, I believe that the pandemic just accelerated what was already, we already had indications that the world would become more global and people would be working remotely and work from home. The teams would be all distributed. So we already had plenty of indications and that where we were going as an industry. The pandemic just accelerated that, because then even traditional industries like investment banks, pharmaceuticals, healthcare, and stuff like that, or finance and stuff, companies that were said we will never be able to work outside our office because our network and security and blah blah blah. In a matter of weeks, everyone was working from home. So this has become a norm. So for us to have more distributed remote work, that is, for me, the pandemic accelerated that. What will be interesting to discuss is how that will impact salaries across the world, because the world now is really becoming more global. Companies that will never outsource, because there were companies that will outsource everything to somewhere in Asia or somewhere that is a bit cheaper, and other things that will keep in-house. That thing doesn't exist anymore, because no one is going to the office. And I don't think that moving forward, if companies, even after vaccine and stuff, if they push people to go back to the offices, they will become less competitive because the world is learning to, like even in traditional environments, we've been working from home for almost a year now. And that's going to still go for another quite a few months until we are all vaccinated and stuff, right? Or if we don't find other variations of the virus, so it might even prolong even further than that. So, which means that as we all learn how to work remote, then it doesn't matter if you are in Belfast or in London. Before co-students, for example, we would only hire people and we would only work with clients that they were from a commutable distance from our office. That is in central London, central Manchester, and central Barcelona. Nowadays, all the work we do is remotely, including with the London companies and Manchester company and Barcelona companies. So it doesn't matter anymore. So how would that impact salaries moving forward?
Would you pay a London salary to somebody working in Belfast? I think that would be the important question because obviously
So
it's
here,
inflated.
so for example, the natural, for example, conversation would be, wow, if there is a market that pays more, and we can hire someone from a different market that, because of the economical factors, the salaries are lower, but they are working for the London market, ideally it would make sense to raise, right? But that is one side of the story. The London companies used to pay higher salary because they valued people to be in their office. But now that people don't need to be in their office, the London companies are far more inclined to hire the guy in Belfast and to hire the guy in Vietnam and in Brazil, which means that they don't want to pay the London salaries themselves, let alone elevate the salaries of people that are not even local. So would we have the reverse impact where the London salaries are going to come down? Because now the competition, for example, there was a very clear win. If you are a London guy, you are in London, you charge more because you live in London, you go to their office. Now for the London companies, well, why do I care? I could hire a guy from Barcelona or from Belfast or from Vietnam.
Yeah, I think it's gonna be really interesting the next few months, especially for property values as well, because obviously living in city centre, you're closer to your work, so higher property values. Now there's all these empty offices. Are we going to see maybe a few renovations of offices into properties? Yeah, it's going to be interesting.
So I think that this is here to stay. Like mainly for software companies, at least have far more flexibility that we had in the past. That's here to stay. So this is for me is a significant change. We will be really far more global and far faster. That's a change.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to maybe watch this back in a few months and see what that change was. Unfortunately, we have no questions, so I'm all out of topics. I think it was just been enough of your time, Sandro.
I
Unless
have one
there's
question for you then. So for
okay.
us, so not to be so. I know that you talked about the book and you liked and stuff, but like, what led you really to start the software craftsmanship community in Belfast, and what are your aspirations with it?
Um, it was just the point you made of just a community could just be started with two people, one other person that's a community already, and I just thought there's nothing really in Belfast that sort of moves towards craftsmanship and what it is today, and I just thought fuck it, we've got nothing to lose, and I thought coming through the education process right here and seeing so many people come through it, I thought there was just a big massive gap in what could be provided, and I feel like Belfast and Northern Ireland is a really nice place to live, and Belfast has got a lot of potential to become some sort of hub of I don't know of I don't want to say craftsmanship, just we already have like a good standard of programmers here, and I just feel there's just more potential to grow. So I just thought just get the information out there, get talking to people like yourself, and just get the conversations going and see where it goes. So yeah,
Cool. That's
um,
right.
so yeah, I think it's a good point to leave off. Thank you very much, Sandro.
I wish you all the best, like with the Belfast community. I hope that you can build a very nice local community. I also hope that as things evolve and have the vaccines, you guys can also meet in person, because that makes a huge difference, right? Although we were talking about remote work and stuff, but like the value of having those personal connections and being able to see each other, pair together, go to the pub afterwards or have a meal, is that's where we built a lot of our relationships. And there's I hope that things evolve like that and you can build that very nice and close community there.
Yeah, especially I think like the sort of here in Northern Ireland and down south, probably same in England. The meetup community, like a big part of it, is going to the pub afterwards. I don't think anybody really gives a fuck about the talk. They just care about the pub afterwards, right? So had this been like different circumstances, we would have been in that situation. Hopefully someday, Sandro, that you can come back to the actual Belfast rather than a virtual one, and we could have that chat in the pub. You'd be very welcome.
I've been to Belfast many, many years ago. I would love to go back.
I didn't even ask that. That probably should have been one of my first questions. What was your thoughts?
Well, I liked it because like when I went there, it was many, many years ago, like when I actually moved to the UK, so like for a few years after, like 2007 and 8 or something along those lines. And what I was fascinated, one of the reasons that I chose Belfast, first of all, I wanted to visit all the countries of the United Kingdom, but also I was very interested in the paintings of the IRA, that kind of stuff, and so seeing all of that stuff.
The murals, yeah. Yeah.
Coming from Brazil, like those are things that you see on TV or the history, but like seeing that in person was really, this is what I was looking for. I loved it, and so yeah.
That's good. Maybe we can get some sort of mural, I don't know, tour when things get better. There was actually a question by Patrick. He said, you think the focus should be on creating alternatives to the university education system or reforming it? So should we build on the current university system, or should we just create our own?
So on the reforming side, I must admit, for example, because I graduated so long ago in a completely different country, I don't think I have enough information to talk about reforming the current education system, because I don't know where exactly the current education system is. But on the other side of the question, that is having alternative methods, that is for sure. I think the education system in general, I'm not even talking about computer science, I'm talking about the basic educations that my kids are having. So I believe that we are due to a big change in the whole education system, mainly because now the kids are being forced to have classes from home. So my two kids, they are 8 and 10. They are having classes online. And universities have been moving to online. So I believe that we will have a much broader range of options. I would like to see personally, Patrick, that was the question, because I came from the computer science, more academic world. Given what I know from my experience, I would rather, instead of having like this big investment in one university course, maybe I would rather have paid for more specific courses that I could do either online or stuff. I think that it would be a better return on investment. But I think we should still keep, for research, for innovations, for this kind of work, we need the universities. I don't think we can replace the universities, but we could have more options.
Definitely. I think Robert Martin, Uncle Bob, gave a good sort of story. He talked about the software projects where the team that they get into quite a mess and teams ask for a rewrite, and they keep asking and finally get the rewrite, and it's the people who wrote the bad code in the first place that do the rewrite, and it's the same situation. So if we were to create our own sort of system, who's to say that we wouldn't end up in the same situation as the universities are facing right now? So I think the same approach you take to software, just refactor what you've already got. There's no point in reinventing the wheel.
Yeah, I like the idea of having more options, and I hope that we never like Uncle Bob has a more gloomy kind of vision for the future. That if you're not careful, we might end up being regulated.
Yeah,
This
I
would
know.
be the worst that could happen to our industry if we become regulated. Because if we became regulated, we would need to also structure the education system, similar to medicine and law and stuff like that. So I hope that we never get to the regulation, so that we can have a very wide range of options, and then people choose. Right, that's where I would like to see
Yeah,
us.
I've talked about the regulations before. I've heard them talk about it, and it's a very scary reality. It could happen. Yeah, hopefully we prevent that. Talking about different options, I hope there's a free option or less cost. So I know a lot of universities are charging still full price, which I don't think is, with the reduced facilities and resources. I think that is very cheeky of them. So hopefully we see some sort of like free option where people can.
Not free, I believe that, for example, now that we're becoming even more global, for example, students are not allowed to go to have classes because of the virus and stuff. Again, everyone is learning to do things remotely. So now, for example, if you are attending in person, a London University, or if you are attending a university in South Africa, it makes no difference if you're doing that remotely. So with that becoming more widely available, you could attend courses regardless of from where they are in the world, and these would hopefully bring also the cost down, because there will be more competition. That's what I hope.
We've actually got another question. Sorry to keep you, Sandro, but
Sure.
Kelvin asked, what is the single biggest thing anybody can do to improve their craft?
So there's no way I can give a specific answer like learn TDD, because that's not the point. I think that the first point is like you recognizing that you need to improve, right? So, but then you also need, so first of all, there is the acknowledgement, because the acknowledgement is the attitude shift, right? So it's when you say, you know what, I want more from my career, I want to achieve more. Once you understand that, then you need to define what would you like to improve, which areas you would like to improve, and then you start taking. For me, like, it's all about you deciding. For me, the question is a little bit more wide than that. It's like you every now and again inspect where you are with your career and what you would like, where you would like to be, and then you start making the right steps. Because it's not learning for the sake of learning, is you need to have some focus as well. So improving your craft needs to be improving your craft towards something. Then you need to define where this something is. It like programming? Is it whatever, having your own company, and so on and so forth, right? What are the areas that you'd like to improve your craft? This is a question I need to answer as well.
Yeah, I think it's a good answer. I don't think, yeah, as I said to people, like craftsmanship isn't like, it's not actual practices or disciplines. Like, it's not test-driven development. It's not producing clean code. It's like there's a sort of like ideology and philosophy behind it. Those are just the things that we do nowadays because it meets those. In a way, would that be right?
I know that we need to go, but this is the point that I would like to make before we go, and I mentioned before, like the distinction between software craftsmanship and extreme programming, right? So one of the things that we've done at the very beginning, software craftsmanship and extreme programming, they were extremely intertwined, because we were coming from that agile world where XP was left behind and Scrum was what was pushing agile boundaries. But for me, what is important to say is that I see software craftsmanship as an ideology, as a mindset, as an attitude. And I think there is an ideology, an attitude, a mindset. They don't have practices. While extreme programming is a methodology, and a methodology has practice. So extreme programming has 13 well-defined practices where TDD, refactoring, simple design, pair programming, all of those are practices within the extreme programming methodology, right? It has 5 values as well. But anyway, so going back to the distinction, the mindset is important because the practices, they should come and go. Today, we value those practices in TDD and pair programming stuff, but I hope that we will find better practices. For me, good practices are only good until we find better ones to replace them, right? So that is, for me, the spirit of craftsmanship, is always trying to strive to be in to better yourself, which means that you cannot just take the status quo, that is TDD, pair programming, and think that that is the end. And mastering that is where you stop. Yeah, you should master that and then say, can we do something better than this? What is the next step? What is missing? And this is, for me, is the mindset. And that relates to the question before.
Yeah, I think that's a really good place to end off. Sandro, thanks again. Hopefully, if we ever do this again, if you ever want to do this again, we'll have improved on our craft of delivering these sort of things. Again, you're very welcome to come over in person. We can sort of arrange something. And it's very cheesy to say, but I just want to say it's really cool to talk to someone who's inspired you a lot. As you said earlier, it's really, it's a sort of good opportunity. So thank you for all the inspiration you've given me and everybody else.
Oh, my pleasure, my pleasure. So for me, to always be a pleasure. So whenever we can travel again, I'll be more than happy to visit Belfast and more than happy to do this again. So anytime soon.
Well, thank you. And thank you to everybody that tuned in. I want to give a special thanks to Danielle, Calvin, and Martin for making this happen. We had some sort of issues before all this, like network issues and all that. So they helped me out quite a bit. And good night, everybody.